Thank you, thank you. It's great to be here in Kuwait. Never seen so many Lebanese people in one place in my life, and I'm Lebanese. And I can hear you thinking already, another Lebanese guy with a PowerPoint. There's actually 67% of the Lebanese economy now is Lebanese people with PowerPoint presentations. That's what we do. I feel so self-conscious walking on this thing. I can hear my mother's voice in my head. Mama, ما تدعس على التلفزيون. Anyway, may I just ask how many of you know about my Twitter account? Great. Okay, great. So I first have to apologize because there'll be no satire today, but I hope what I'll be talking about will be more interesting and try to kind of link it to the previous talk. This will focus mainly about the vision part. So it's looking at the future of the Arab city because of the huge challenges that we face today that have been manifesting themselves very radically in the past 10 years. And the first volume is going to be dealing with the Gulf. There's many reasons for that, partly because I don't want to start with Beirut because it's very difficult. And before I started that, I started engaging with people on Twitter, which is a great medium really to interact. And I asked a very broad questions about how people feel their lives have changed and what their aspirations are. And I had really a lot of answers. But what it really brought home is that people don't expect their lives to be similar to their parents' lives. They have changed in many ways, but there's one central idea in there, which is what their parents took for granted in terms of housing, employment, and things like that wasn't necessarily going to be the case because the economies are changing, their nature is changing, and what the state can provide is changing quite radically. So this book will have 10 different themes. I'm going to discuss 3 of them today. The first one will be the idea of urbanism. How do we create a sense of urbanity in cities that have been expanding very radically? If you just look at something like Dubai, a place like Dubai, you can see the scale of growth, and it's not only the only city that have witnessed this state of growth. And I would argue that the way in which it was planned didn't really catch up with the speed of this growth. And it's not just Dubai. If you look across the region, the scale of cities that are emerging, I mean, Riyadh is knocking onto 7 million, Jeddah is over 4 million, and the scale is just increasing very rapidly. What we see as solutions for that is largely kind of a theater, a sense of spectacle, and not to criticize it because development is needed, but I want to ask a different question. Is this the best that we can do? Is this the right model to develop forward? Now the problem starts is the model that we've used throughout the 20th century for the growth of cities is inherited from the 1920s. It's a 100-year-old model that was based on ideas, very radical modern ideas at the time, that talked about creating lots of open space, vertical skyscrapers, high-rise skyscrapers to free up all this space. And they were governed by, I think what you will recognize here is the motor car, the vehicle that kind of predominated the 20th century, gave us this urban form. Now, this comes from the ideas of the architect Le Corbusier, who was one of the most influential architects in history. And I would argue today that this model is what we've actually built over and over and over again. Aesthetically, it might not look like that, but that is the nub of it. You have a plot of land and you extrude a building, as we say, and then you put in huge roads. Now, this is his original sketch from 1922, but this is actually the reality. This is the cities that we know or we're familiar with. And if you look again at somewhere like Dubai, this is the reality. It's endless traffic jams and just building popping up everywhere. On the residential side, we haven't actually, I'd argue, done better. The kind of the single family dwelling, and there's a lot of discussion about it yesterday, we've created a typology that's completely inward looking. It's very comfortable, it provides the space and all of that, but there is no space for any kind of active public space within it. There is no space for interaction, and it doesn't even work for the climate, it doesn't even work for the culture. So what's happened is within this intervening 50, 60 years, we've produced an architecture that's not suitable for the culture. And primarily because my main interest, and this combines what I do in architecture and what I do in the satire, I'm very focused on the idea of activating the public realm, having a healthy public sphere. Part of that is fighting for political freedoms and arguing for freedom of expression and freedom of speech. But there's another side to it. There's a physical side to it, is the creation of those type of public spaces that used to characterize the Arab context, where people can interact, debate, and discuss. In some of our earlier work, we were kind of taking a look at creating typologies that are completely modern but are inspired by that. But the idea now is to start to go beyond this. Are we simply, by doing that, just copying the past and kind of trying to reproduce the souk, or can we move forward? Now, the great news is the technology today allows us to design things in a much more interactive way. And this is a kind of a VR, another Lebanese guy talking about VR system that we've designed in the office. And this is kind of a simplified model that allows us to interact actively when we're designing cities or quarters, look at the size and the impact and how close the buildings to each other. And if you see the colors, they tell you what the solar exposure is. So the redder the color is, the hotter the space is going to be. As it moves towards the blue, then it becomes cooler. So we can do all of that now in real time. And we actually do it in a much more complicated way to try to understand what the impact of the physical form on the climate. And you can see how now, just by simply lifting the buildings, we've created much cooler space at the ground floor. So we have this technology at our disposal, and the question is, what are we going to do with it? Which brings me to the point of interaction, which is this big theme that we're characterizing public space around. Last year I was in Riyadh and I got into an Uber, started talking to the driver who was Saudi, and I said, what can I do over here? Where can I go? And he said, you know, the only thing we can do here, young people, is go to shopping malls. Which was, you know, reflecting a certain reality, but also kind of a certain climactic condition that prevails in the region. Now, this image, though, that people have about the region, which is a lot of the time characterized by the hype around Dubai and the spectacle, isn't really the only type of public space. There are different kinds of public spaces. Some of them are geared towards kind of consumption and retail, but others are more cultural in nature. And then there are many, many, many layers to the experience of living in the Gulf that I don't think receive the same attention. And the question again, how can we learn from this and start to inject some energy into them? Posit this idea of the shopping mall against what's coming next, right? We've all been experiencing this. E-commerce is coming. What's done in Europe and North America is this. We're experiencing the modern ruin of the shopping mall. And the question we started asking ourselves is, shopping malls really work as public spaces here because they're climate controlled and people love to be there. However, they now offer one experience only, which is the experience of shopping. And the question was, can we start to inject them with other types of activities so they start to resemble like neighborhoods, typical neighborhoods of the city? How can we bring that energy? Imagine a European piazza with everything that's around it into that. So I decided to put my best team on the job. And I asked them to reimagine the shopping mall as a neighborhood, as a part of the city. And the results were quite impressive. So this is my oldest daughter, who's a bit more restrained, but I think she kind of picked up this idea that when you start to have a more of a civic quality to the city, obviously there's a lot of emphasis on toy shops and things like that, and sweet shops, but you can see the library, and you can see the gym, you can see workplaces. The younger one was a little bit madder, and there was even a circus, and she put our company in there. But it's kind of like, you know, started to kind of draw out this potential that we can have with this place. Now, this is very important because this is the type of workplace that we've been designing now. It's transforming very radically. And this is a building that we did for Sky in London, and it doesn't look like any office building looked 20 years ago. And the nature of work is changing. And the building itself has become self-contained, and it has all these internal streets, and you can see very easily how this transformation of the shopping malls can go, so it start to attract workplaces and start to attract other venues. Now, previously we tried to do this in a competition for the Sheikh Zayed Stadium in Abu Dhabi, where was this massive structure, and the question was, what could we do with it? And we said, there's really a lot of potential here to turn it into a genuine public space, but you have to have a way of controlling the climate, and we can use a lot of kind of sustainable cooling technologies to enable that to happen. But actually, on reflection, because we have all those shopping malls, I think the question is that we're kind of proposing, can we break up the shopping mall, allow it to connect better to the city, and then draw in the crowds to what becomes a civil institution? The next topic that we looked at was movement, which is again very key in shaping cities. And the meaning of this really was around all the excitement that came is, in fact, we're looking within 20 years, we don't think anybody's going to be driving a car anymore. And you can see already the range of technologies that are either there or soon to come to the region. There's so many substitutes, but I don't think anybody's designing cities that can catch up with that. Now, we've been designing our own system for automotive vehicles, which basically the idea is to combine the benefits of public transport with the convenience of the private car. And essentially, the idea is everybody can order a vehicle, which will change in time, the nature of which will change in time, and that becomes a dedicated transport system that's far more efficient than all the systems that we have at the moment. You don't have one person riding in a car blocking all the roads, and we put all of those into the dedicated tunnels. This is how we envisioned this in Stockholm. So there was this glass underwater tubes in which those vehicles can run, enable you to take away all the cars from the surface. And if you look at why that it's important, and again, you'll see it in Kuwait, you'll see it in Abu Dhabi, you'll see it in Riyadh, the space that roads take is absolutely huge. And that's not only about the space, it's about how they paralyze the public space and public interaction within it. So traditionally, in a city designed for cars, this is what we'd do. We'd give up that much space for cars. With the new system, when we eliminate the car, we put it in a dedicated tunnel, we can claim back all of that space. We can build cities that are tighter, which is very important for the Gulf, because you can protect from the sun and create these shaded spaces. And this is how the fabric can transform. You can have this kind of traditional, more tighter fabric as the technology changes. And the next idea was, why actually put these vehicles underground? We can actually start lift them. We can start kind of running these tubes through buildings at different heights, allowing us to do all these different permutations. Now, the next drawing is a bit complicated to get, but if you tie all these buildings together, you have your three-dimensional now mobility system running through, enabling you to transform the structure of the city. And this has been a dream for architects for a long time. How can we reach this three-dimensional city? Is the city not based on a building that's just popping up with roads everywhere? Can we start to create three connections in 3 dimensions, and bear in mind that these will be inhabited? So again, you look at a typical model of how we're dealing with skyscrapers now in the Gulf, and then can you at a sketch level start connecting them like that? And reality of it, we're already starting to see this type of architecture emerge. The idea is, how can we take it forward? This is one of my favorite slides that we did for this. You know, you can envision that at some moment you're driving your vehicle up in the skies, so to speak. But what is the immediate benefit of it is, again, let's take a look at Dubai. All that space that's dedicated currently to vehicles can be completely transformed, because now the movement can start to occur at multiple levels. And this is not just for the movement. What we're saying is we want to create a sense of density that's similar of old Arab cities within the current fabric that we have. So we're starting to create these horizontal skyscrapers, and we're starting to kind of intensify and densify the experience much more. And again, the ground plane then becomes open for us. This is where we can do all the work that we want to do. Once the car disappears and mobility is 3-dimensional, this is the space that we can start to occupy. I'm going to close with the last one, which is quite an important one, which is the topic of living. What is the typology that we want to create that has this social and cultural qualities that we aspire to? And again, here the background to this is the expectations are changing, but we still, as countries and systems, have to provide large amounts of housing. Currently, we have two models only in the Gulf. We either do that, it's very efficient because it's very dense, but it doesn't create any space for interaction. People are just isolated within their own little pods. Or we create the repetitive, model of the cookie cutter, we call it. It's more suburban in nature, it's comfortable, it's very inward looking, and it doesn't create those spaces for interaction. So we've got those two models, and the question is, could we start to think of new models? But we're not starting from scratch. Some people have been trying to do kind of more of a, mixed typology, creating public spaces, and they're very successful examples, I think. Some of them are too nostalgic in terms of the architecture, but I think it's a beginning of a changing attitude. But the question again, how can we push this further? And then, ironically, kind of looking at the future, start looking at the past again, started to look at typologies that were starting to emerge within the 50s and the 60s that I think would be absolutely suitable for the climate of the Gulf. And this is looking at the Paul Rudolph's proposal for the Lower Manhattan Expressway in 1967, where the idea again was to decouple the vehicles from where people live. And then he introduced this monorail system. You can see these funny little vehicles that take you straight to your apartment. So the idea is all vehicular transport happens elsewhere. Now we have a solution for not to rely on the car. We can transform things, and we have more advanced movement. But what these kind of typologies start to do is they start to create a type of spaces that are both more sociable. They create spaces where people can interact, but you can combine the typology of the apartment building with the single family house, as in every single unit will have a large terrace or garden within it. These are renderings that were done much later of his project, and that's the kind of quality that you start to get and the sort of neighborly potential that emerges. But what I love more is the other side, the flip side. When you stagger the apartments like that, you get the spaces in the middle, and you just think how adequate these spaces would be in a hot climate like the Gulf, where you get this natural protection from the sun and all the shading. If you go like 2 years earlier, and Spielhaus from the MIT, not the MIT, the Minnesota Institute of Technology, who was quite radical as well, and he proposed taking the idea even further, as in to have the vehicles traveling, throughout the building, and then you have these dedicated vehicles taking you straight to your apartment and create these mega structures out of them. And again, the impulse is similar. We're creating a new typology that creates all these open spaces and allows people, the kind of to combine the benefits of a single family house with the apartment building. If you zoom in on a little bit on it, again, at the time they didn't know what sort of technology would be used, but they imagined these vehicles traveling on multiple stories. And he had an amazing, I don't know if he reminds you of another architect who likes to draw cartoons, but he loved to present this, which I find like really amazing. This is from 1965, kind of talking about trends that we're picking up again today in very user-friendly ways without really understanding what the technology that will enable this to happen will be. So for example, he was talking about the electric car will change our cities, gas stations will disappear, electric power consumption will double, and all these kind of projections. The great news for the Gulf is once you stop using the oil, there's a lot of sun to utilize, so that's all built into the system. But I find a sense of optimism about that generation of architects kind of trying to think of the future of cities that we have lost. There's almost like an attempt to reconnect with these visionary ideas. He potentially kind of secured some federal funding to try to build this city on a real scale, and this is what the model would have looked like. Unfortunately, that technology didn't exist at the time, and he found the site somewhere in the middle of the swamps where nobody wanted to live, and the project got killed by protesters that opposed it. Now, the story doesn't end here, because every time I've presented this before, every Kuwaiti person said to me, we actually have that building, or until recently had that building. And it's actually Al Sawaber complex. And this is, which is currently being demolished. And I owe a lot of gratitude to Asil Al-Raqam, who's done, the Kuwaiti architect who's done a lot of work on kind of archiving this. And who's familiar with it? Okay, great. And actually, it was based on the same ideas. And I think if you look at the original vision, the kind of public space that's being created, and again, the spaces that are created within the apartments, that was the vision for it. You look at the renderings, again, come back to this idea. Once you start to stagger that, you're creating spaces that are naturally shaded. And from talking to people, you know, who knew it, they said that it actually worked. It didn't just work because of the architecture. It worked because the investment was there, the schools was there, the support was there, and that was what needed to create this vision. The reality of it, what was really built wasn't exactly what was envisioned. It was compromised, but still, I think it had the potential to realize this typology. And I think for me, this was quite a kind of an instructive point that I want to end on with. Asil has captured very well, and I encourage you, if you don't follow her on Twitter, to follow her, because it's a very educational timeline. And I think there's something very important about not getting stuck in this loop of paying lip service to some imagined nostalgia of the past, but to reclaim the ability to imagine a new modernity for ourselves, much as was done before. You know, you go back to the 60s and the 70s, there was this idea that we can reimagine things, that we're not kind of, the past is not the weight on us, but to start to become more experimental and radical in how we approach questions of cities and architecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karl. But the people standing in the back, you can come and sit on the stairs. There is still more space here on the sofa for you to be comfortable. What I would also like to remind you before the Q&A is that Karl's book is being sold, and there will be a book signing at the lunch break outside in Al-Hosh. I just want to read one thing from your book. Arabic is technically the 5th most spoken language in the world. But if you discount the words inshallah and habibi, it drops to number 73. And because it was Fairuz's birthday yesterday, Fairuz walks into a bar, the moon caresses the olive tree. Q&A.
You should read the Kulthum one, or allow me to read the Kulthum joke, because I haven't done it. Actually, I don't need to read it. I'll just perform it. So this came out of a whole series of jokes, like someone walks into a bar. It's a halal bar, don't worry. And it was like I tried to do all the Arab musicians, and with like various kind of degrees of success. And I was stuck on Kulthum because she's my favorite, right? I was thinking, what is the perfect joke that's going to catch the spirit of Kulthum? So the joke was, so Kulthum walks into a bar, walks into a bar.
Thank you, Karl. Q&A, we have lots. Where do we start? In the middle?
And you can ask about the book. You don't need to ask about the presentation.
For the time being, I'll stick to the presentation. But
okay.
In terms, you brought up a lot about a feeling of density. Does that apply to just city centers or the entire urban area as a whole? Like, for example, if you were to apply that concept to Kuwait, would that just apply in Kuwait city or all of its suburbs as well?
No, I think cities will naturally have to have a sense of a varying density. But where we lose that sense of density currently, that's important not just for how many people are there, it's for the intensity of public interaction and activity is really about the central areas. Now, it could be useful in other parts of the city, but I think actually of all the Gulf cities that I've visited, Kuwait City is the one that has more potential in terms of, it doesn't need a lot of work for it to kind of acquire that walkability, pedestrian-friendly nature, because largely, even though the buildings are not there, it's still the old city. You can realize where it was. You can feel the kind of the imprint of it in the way the streets are laid out, in the juxtaposition of the buildings. You know, I was walking around Shark, and it was totally perfect day for walking around, walked around quite a bit, and you can jump between different places. So I think it's kind of, that density can be revived in different ways, and some of the ideas are more provocative than necessarily realistic, but behind them there's this kind of desire to kind of re-inject the cities with this density. And it's something, if you look at Arab heritage, if you look at Arab tradition where people used to meet and interact and the ideas used to come, the Gulf in particular, if you look at the history of poetry and literature within it, a lot of it is related to these kind of urban setups where people were able to interact, and that's something that I would love to capture back.
Okay, question here.
Hi. So one of the things, actually one of the plans of Le Corbusier for Buenos Aires, he actually introduced the idea of raising the streets and letting the ground as useful. And it's not that's I'm not saying that this is not an idea that worth exploring, but I'm saying can we actually think about the solution for actually reducing the number of cars on cities, and you know, promoting the idea of, you know, either walkability, bikeability, and
so that's exactly what we're saying. Yeah. In our solution, there will be no cars anymore.
Exactly, but I mean, the solution seems like, oh, let's just move them away in a different, you know, space. Yet it's not a war on car. We're saying that we don't want car, or we don't expect cars to be in cities. But I'm saying we have to start probably also promoting the other aspects of transportation in cities. My other question, this is not this is just a comment, but a question is, I'm an urbanist, and this is quite an important issue for me in Khaliji city in specific, because we have basically mirrored the model of American cities. They realized their problems way earlier than we did. They have fixed it now, or they are trying to fix it, and they have built an actual solid cities, I mean, in terms of big cities, earlier on, that it was easy to get back to their real cities. For us, we have demolished our real cities, basically, and because we have jumped, and we didn't have, you know, a timeline that is more consistent. But my question now, we end up with what you call suburbanism, as like individual villas and everywhere, and we lost our public spaces, we lost our interaction, we lost our neighborhood feel as in public spaces. Also, we have created what you call these huge buildings, huge streets, and nothing is really humane on the level of a human. But what is the easier solution? Instead of saying that we're gonna create new projects that will solve the, you know, our problems that we have created, can we interfere in a way that we work with what we have now, and we promote these new ideas, but
sorry, I'm conscious of the time.
Yeah.
I think you've made your point, but the whole point that we're trying to say is we're intervening with the fabric that exists. But also, I have to make a very quick important point about, there's you get a lot of propaganda about what European cities have done, right? In terms of getting rid of suburbs, and none of it is true. The suburbs still exist. What has happened in North American city and European cities over the past 10, 15 years is the expulsion of the poor to the suburbs, is the inversion of the traditional equation, and turning city centers exclusively for the rich. And this is documented, and they're starting to wake up to it today. So a lot of those policies that on the surface are about being friendly to the environment and about being anti-car and about being, you know, all about inclusivity and stuff, actually what they end up doing is absolutely rocketing real estate price in city centers. They've created playgrounds for the rich, and today the poor are more likely to live in underserved suburbs than to live in city centers, which wasn't the case as recently as the 70s. So we shouldn't actually repeat their mistakes and start to kind of replicate this fantasy model that they're creating. Their model is a return to the 19th century model. This is why I'm kind of completely unsympathetic to any view that tries to go to the past. You can learn from the past, but to try to recreate it will always be a Disney, right? We have to have the courage, like every generation before us, to create a city after its own image. I'll give just one example from Beirut. Beirut is an ongoing discussion about how the old heritage is being destroyed. And it's very right, it's right on, because there needs to be a public debate about that. But the buildings that are being lost, which is the late Ottoman, early French Mandate period, are the buildings that now people are regretting the loss of. I went and researched their history, and they were built towards the end of the 19th century. And interestingly, the records that I found is the people of Beirut at the time were decrying the demolition of the old Beirut, which was mainly timber houses, and the building of these new buildings in the 19th century that everybody loves now. The point is, you have to move with the time. You can do it in a culturally consistent manner, or sometimes in a manner that's completely got nothing to do with it, but it's never an excuse not to have the courage to imagine your city that fits for your time.
Our last question.
To that point, Karl, what do you make of all the pseudo souks, for example, in the Gulf, where there are heritage areas and buildings that are knocked down, and then you get souks or areas that are built to look like the old ones to give you the feeling of, nostalgia, and then all that gentrification. But we also have some of that in Lebanon and in other cities.
No, I was going to say, I think, again, that's a case of just trying to copy something from the past. I mean, we tried to do it in the Beirut souks, and effectively what we end up getting was an open-air shopping mall, not a souk. Why? Because, the model of souk doesn't work anymore in Beirut. However, to kind of preempt that, I was in Mubarakiyya yesterday, and it's fantastic. It works very well. It doesn't need to be, it doesn't even need to look like something traditional. It's a model that works. It works for the climate, works for the culture, it's full of people, and that's absolutely fantastic. But I think we owe it ourselves, and we owe it to our kind of generation to start to imagine things differently, and that's the kind of the vision that I want to promote.
Last short question.
Hi.
How many last short questions
She
are
said
going to
last
have?
short question.
10?
Yes.
I would continue what she said.
Yeah.
I think the main question is, are we willing to give up and give away our vehicles, which is our main private space that we have? We use it every day, and
Exactly.
use the public transportation. I think for me, I would love to, but I think for most people, they are very much into having this private space.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. This is a very important question. I think I had to do it very quickly to describe the system, because I had only 20 minutes and Yasmina threatened me if I overstepped it. But the point is, when we say we're getting rid of it, we're giving something of equal comfort and convenience. The preachers of the public transport ideology, that sort of is become more about punishing the people who can kind of need the cars or enjoy the cars, rather than doing something constructive, right? And you hear this, like in every conference, there'll be someone who will, recite that cliche that in a rich society is one in which everyone takes the public transport, not the blah, 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 right? But because this is not objective, it doesn't look at the reality. You have to face the realities of how cities are structured and how people can move. And we've already seen how the exclusion of people from access to mobility can create huge disenfranchisement. So let's not be seduced by these Western people kind of talking about a very elitist view of what the car is. What we're proposing is different. We're proposing to say, instead of the problem of public transport, right? If you have 2 people on or 100 people in, you still have to run the train or run the bus, okay? With the car, the problem is the car is there, you have to buy it, you have to park it, and then one person is using. How do we create the synergy between the two? So the idea is then when you get this vehicle that you just can order on your app, and it can work for everybody, it becomes like a public transport system that's geared. It's almost like translating the sharing economy into mobility. So then you can have your own space, you can go exactly where you want to go. It works as a public transport system, but tailored for where you want to go. And that is combining the benefits of the two. So it's far more efficient. You don't have vehicles running all the time if nobody's using them. And the first person who's going to crack that, I think, is going to transform the 21st century city.
Thank you. I'm joking. That's it. We're done. Thank you so much, Karl.
Thank you.
We're
Thank you
off to
very
our
much.
lunch break.
Thank you.